All right, come on in, everybody. Welcome back to another Tennessee Holler Facebook Live. I'm Holler founder Justin Canoe. We're at tnholler.com, at the TN Holler on Twitter and Facebook and everywhere else. We also have hollers all over the place, including over in Memphis, and your support helps make that happen. So we appreciate that. Monthly support really, really helps. And today, speaking of which, we have Senator Raumesh Akbari here with us, fresh off of her State of the State Prebuttal. Senator, how are you?
Hey, Justin, I'm doing well. I'm hype and excited about continuing the good work of serving the people of Tennessee. And also, it's Akberry like Blackberry.
Akberry. Akberry
no problem. Like Blackberry.
That's my excuse for getting that wrong. Senator, so you just did your prebuttal. What would you say the top level message that you're trying to get out to people through the prebuttal, if they could take away one thing that essentially Democrats are standing for in opposition to what the governor is going to talk about on Monday? What is it?
That it's time for bold action, that we have a series of inequities in education funding, criminal justice reform, our care for our workers and the economy, and that we need to take bold, decisive actions to remedy that. And we have the opportunity and the ability to do it. We just have to have the will.
So on Monday, Governor Lee is going to get up there. He's going to say, we just solved education in Tennessee. You know, Sapicki's saying, oh, we want to be number one. He's going to say they took that bold action. What's the real story about the action that was just taken, both with the education bills that they passed without hearing from teachers and the healthcare initiative that they passed without hearing from doctors? What's the real story there?
Well, I'll say, you know, there are good things in the education package, and there are also things that raise concern. Certainly, there's some concern around the third grade retention component, around requiring 80% testing in person for our students in order for districts to be held harmless, and certainly around whether or not the funding mechanism will be sufficient for these programs that are being introduced. Now, I will say this. The real problem, the core of the problem in Tennessee education is that we're 46 in education funding. Our funding formula is broken, and it puts our local governments in really tough positions. For instance, the way that our system is set up, if a district has, you know, a certain level of teachers, say they might have 220 teachers, but only 90 of those teachers are funded in the state's funding formula, which means that the county government has to make up the gap. And that's just really unfortunate because it, one, takes away from really important services the county provides, but the burden also falls again. It's almost like our constituents are being double taxed for education. The burden falls again on possibly having a property tax increase. So until we're no longer 46 in the nation in education funding, until we're fully funding our schools and providing the amount of money for our teachers, for meaningful interventions for our schools, and for our children to have state-of-the-art supplies and the technology that they need, then we're really going to be behind the curve regardless of what we do.
The number that I've heard is that based on inflation, teachers are making less today than they made 10 years ago. Are you saying that even with this injection of funds, we're still going to be 46th in the nation? The money that they're putting into the system is not going to change that?
First of all, hi, Cola. Hi. And second of all, no, it's not going to change that until we change the foundation. Now, these are 4 programs. I am pleased with the investment in literacy and those types of interventions. I do think that the summer camps and the after-school programs could really do a great thing. But again, I'm concerned about funding for it. But no, those are not going to change the basic foundation and formula under which education is funded in this state. And until we tackle that, then it's not going to change.
So let's stay on schools for a second. We're now seeing the biggest school systems go back to school in person. Sorry about Koa. Do you think that they're ready for this? Is this happening based on the numbers, or is it happening based on politics?
I think that there are some folks in Nashville that have tried to apply political pressure. But I'll tell you this, I have a great relationship with our superintendent in Shelby County, and I can assure you, and also with the school board, And I can assure you, every decision that they're making is based on numbers and what's best for the community in which we live. So there might be political pressure, but at the end of the day, our local government, our local school system is going to do what's best for students, whether that's virtual learning only or some sort of hybrid model. I think yesterday, Dr. Ray, the superintendent of our school system, did kind of detail some plans for reopening, and Nashville is going to resume some form of in-person learning on Monday. But the numbers have to dictate how we move forward. And I'm pleased and proud of our superintendents and school boards that have done just that, regardless of the pressure that has come down from some elected officials in Nashville.
What about when it comes to teachers and vaccines? I know not all teachers are vaccinated. We've heard stories of people traveling to far off counties, even out of state, to get vaccinated. Do you have any concerns about the situation as far as teachers having access to the vaccine, and in general, vaccinations in Tennessee? How is that going?
Well, I'll say this. I think that it was a great move, and this was based on information from the CDC, to move teachers up to the 1B category, right behind healthcare workers and first responders. I think that's really important. But I will say, and this is really based on catastrophic failures from our previous federal administration, from the Trump administration, to actually get vaccines out to our communities. Tennessee has been ready to vaccinate folks. It's just that we don't have the supplies that we need to make it happen. In some counties where they have a smaller population of first responders or those in the medical field, they might be able to move on to different phases, but that's not the case in Shelby County. Now, I am really excited about the bold action that the Biden administration is taking, shipping vaccines, some of them directly to pharmacies, and making a commitment to get 100 million doses in arms in the first 100 days of the presidency. So I think that's going to make a big difference. And I do know that a lot of our teachers already fall into the categories that are able to get vaccines. But until that happens, we have to make sure that our teachers have the proper PPE that they need, that there's adequate spacing in schools, that there is rigid and rapid testing done so that people can be safe and confident in that environment, and that we are following all healthcare guidance that's been recommended. But certainly, I'm hoping that we will move soon into the teachers phase. The only thing is, if we bump teachers up any further, we will potentially be pushing some of our elderly and immune compromised folks out of the queue. So my hope is, with Walmart now offering vaccines, with Walgreens offering vaccines, with Shelby County Health Department really doing some community-based, like in Whitehaven and Fraser, and communities where people in my district live, that it will speed up the vaccination process for sure.
So when it comes to teachers, and yeah, by the way, I know you mentioned you lost an aunt. I'm sorry to hear that. That's never easy. When it comes to teachers and schools, it seems like the framing from the beginning has always been either teachers and schools, or getting back to school, or either the economy or safety. Like, safety has sort of been on the other side of all of this stuff, when I think you mentioned this in your speech, that's sort of a miscalculation, a poor framing, that they've always been one and the same. Can you elaborate on that?
For sure. And that's something we've been saying as a caucus from the beginning. If people are not healthy, and this is based on evidence has been presented by Dr. Fauci and others, if people are not healthy, then the economy cannot be healthy, because they're not able to go to work, they're not able to care for their families, and it's a tremendous cost burden to provide care. So you have to focus on the health of the people. That goes hand in hand with the health of our economy and with being able to have in-person learning. So I think that's the most important thing. It's not an either or. It has to be a primary focus on health and keeping people safe, because 10,000 Tennesseans have lost their life. That is something that last year, this time, we never could have imagined. I remember when we first started hearing about COVID-19 and this novel coronavirus, and we were concerned, and we said, well, maybe it's just something that's in Asia, or maybe it's something that's in Europe, or there's some cruise ships that have had these issues. I remember Minority Leader Jeff Yarbrough said to me, the World Health Organization is predicting that this is going to be a global pandemic, and potentially 50% of the population could be infected. And I thought, oh my gosh, I hope that's not true. Like I couldn't fathom or imagine it. And yet here we are almost a year later. And some people still don't take it seriously. They still don't wear masks. They think that we should operate business as usual. But the bottom line is the way for us to get back to business as usual is by taking this pandemic seriously. It's by continuing to take safe measures to keep ourselves and others safe, and by getting the vaccine when your opportunity comes. I cannot stress enough how pleased I am that the Biden administration came in on day one and provided an organized plan for vaccine distribution and enforced certain federal mandates for mask wearing. The science is clear. We always want to say follow the science. The science is clear about wearing a mask and what it can do to protect people in this state and in this country.
Well, we see your comments. I see Tiffany Crow talking about how she's a COVID-19 long hauler who used to be a normal, healthy 28-year-old, begging people not to risk anyone losing their lives. Clarksville hauler chimed in saying 10,000 too many because we just crossed the 10,000 mark here in Tennessee. I just want to give you a chance. You don't have to take the bait here, but, in general, how have you felt about Governor Lee's response throughout the pandemic?
I'm going to be honest with you, and this is documented from our letters as a caucus. I wish that we would have acted sooner. I know that we're dealing with an unprecedented crisis, and some people, you've kind of had to learn to ride the bike as you're riding it. And I think that our federal government truly had a complete lack of leadership that threw states to the wolves and they had to fight against each other to get PPE, to get testing and test materials, to set up the basic infrastructure to try and attack this virus. And I think it became politicized in a way that it never should have. I believe we should have had a statewide mask mandate back in the late spring, early summer. We had it in Shelby County. Our big counties had it. I believe that we may have opened up our businesses too quickly. I think that there's this desire to say we're open without focusing on what reopening actually means. And I understand my family has a small business, a service-based business that has seen a 50 to 60% reduction in our revenue. So it's hard. It is not easy. But at the end of the day, we have to prioritize keeping people safe. And I do wish that a little more decisive action, or a lot more decisive action, was taken. Something so simple as a mask mandate would have made a tremendous difference. Something so simple as saying, hey, this is not about politics. This is about people. This is about lives. This is about safety. And getting away from this rhetoric that Donald Trump pushed down. And states, of course, especially Republican-led states, they took it and they ran with it. And that's the ideological policies that they put in place that I believe were less based on science and more based on the guidance that President Trump was putting out, as opposed to Dr. Fauci or Dr. Birx. When Dr. Birx came to Tennessee, she made recommendations about closures of certain businesses, and those recommendations were not taken. She made recommendations about a mask mandate, and those recommendations were not taken. So I think that I'm happy, I'm thankful that our numbers are on the decline. I hope that will continue. We get the numbers every day, and every day I'm like, oh, thank you, Jesus. This is great. This is great. We're going down. But now is not the time to let up, because if we want to have a summer and a fall where we return to life as we want it to be, we're going to have to keep up wearing our mask socially. And I won't even say socially distancing. I'll say just being together apart and also getting that vaccine when we can.
Yeah, people should remember that the White House did say we need a mask mandate. We actually talked to county mayors on here that asked for a mask mandate. Governor Lee wouldn't do it. He was pandering to extremists. It was the right thing to do. It would have taken a lot of the pressure off of those county mayors who ended up bearing the brunt of the complaints when it came to this stuff. And, I just remember him saying the storm is passing over and over again. And, here we are a year later. So I agree with everything you're saying. I wanted to move on. Speaking of, I guess it's similar topic, is the stimulus package. We have 1 million people in Tennessee out of work. What do you want to see from the Biden administration and the Democrats as far as the stimulus package goes right now?
Well, I want to see a continued emphasis on providing additional benefits for members in our community who have been economically impacted by the pandemic and the unemployment pandemic that we've had as well. I'd like to see increased weekly benefits for those who are utilizing unemployment insurance. And I'd also like them to complete the stimulus payment. I think it was initially, they ended up giving 600, so that would be an additional $1,400, because the bottom line is, when folks have money in their pocket and they can feel safe and whole and they can take care of their families, our economy thrives. We do not want to move into a situation like in 2009 where we hit this bottom and there was massive unemployment where people could not afford the basic things to take care of their family. I'd also like to see an increased emphasis on pushing the vaccine out, just continuing that path that they've been talking about. And lastly, and this is something that has not really been addressed that much, is making our state and our local governments whole. Because you look at a city like Memphis, like Shelby County, and even in Davidson County and Nashville, tourism is a big part of the dollars that are raised through tax revenue. And I fear that at least our local governments might have to make some really tough decisions related to spending and their budgets. Now, I know the state is, I think, $3 billion over what our projected revenue was. So I'm not worried about the state, but I'm concerned about our local county and city governments.
It seems like when that comes up, Republicans at the federal level, sorry about the banging, Republicans at the federal level say, well, we're not bailing out blue states and blue cities, which, by the way, they always leave out how most of the cities are blue because, you know, when people are living together in cities, they tend to vote blue. Even here in Tennessee, our like 4 or 5 biggest cities are blue. But what do you say to that when they politicize it that way?
You know, I think it's unfortunate, and I say stop it. Stop with that foolishness, okay? Our county and our city governments provide essential services for members of the community. It is not a bailout. It is a stopgap to help those services continue. Stop making it a red or blue thing. We are not red or blue people. We are people. And if you truly want to do your job and serve the constituents that have elected you and those who didn't even vote for you, you've got to think about that and stop making everything so partisan. I mean, at the end of the day, we are in a global pandemic. Communities have been ravaged. Economies have been terrorized. We have seen the highlight and the spotlight on the mass racial injustice that has occurred in our country. If not now, then when? When are you going to act and rise to the dignity of the office that you serve? When are you going to put partisan politics aside and extend a hand of bipartisanship and statesmen and stateswomanship? Come on now. We are at a place we never thought we'd be. It's time for our government to work for the people and not just pander to a base. We've seen some things in Congress. I mean, no one on this planet will forget January the 6th. Never in my lifetime did I imagine or think that our nation's capital would be seized. Do you know how hard it is to get into the Capitol building? You know how hard it is to get into the Tennessee Capitol floor. You can't come on the floor. And they were sitting on the dais in the speaker's office, chanting at hang Mike Pence. Mike Pence is a Republican, and they wanted to hang him. Come on. At what point do we wake up and say, is this the America that we claim to be? I mean, now, those who have been disproportionately affected by inequities and injustice have always been a little skeptical on the America we claim to be. I think Dr. King said that the American dream is a check that has been written but has not been cashed for many Black folks in America. But come on, y'all. At what point do we step aside and we say, we have got to do better? We have got to do more. We have got to put this partisan nonsense aside. I don't get it. I mean, I'm a Democrat through and through. I'm blue to my core. But at the end of the day, I have to do what's right for people. And I hope that my colleagues on both sides of the aisle, because whether you're extreme left or extreme right, it's not how we should govern. It's not how we should operate. And it's not how we should lead as a country.
Well, amen to all that. Just a couple things, and then I'll let you go here. You mentioned racial issues, and one thing that has come back up this week, in I think 10 days or 15 days, there's supposed to be a Tennessee Historical Commission meeting about getting rid of the Grand Wizard bust, the KKK Grand Wizard bust in our Capitol. It's now come up that apparently Lieutenant Governor McNally and Speaker Sexton are saying that that commission meeting won't actually count because it's not properly before the commission. To me, it seems like they're just throwing up more roadblocks because they want to keep this thing there. Do you have any sense of what's really going on there? And, what can people expect and how can they push?
I'll tell you what, it is disheartening and it is hurtful to have to walk past the bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest as I do my service to my district by serving in the Senate. To have a man who is so vile, who made his fortune off the selling of Black bodies as if we were tractors or shovels, who was a main leader in the massacre at Fort Pillow, and who was the first Grand Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, a terrorist organization. And for there not to be agreement that this bus needs to go, he didn't serve in the General Assembly. He wasn't a governor. He wasn't a state senator. He wasn't a state representative. There is no reason for him to be in our hallowed halls. If you go to the first floor where the governor's offices are located, they only have pictures of governors on those walls. I can't get my picture on that wall unless I become the governor. The same should be the case.
Are you announcing something?
No, I am not. No, sir. Nice try though. Cola knows that's not even no. So, but there's no reason why Nathan Bedford Forrest should be in that hallowed hall. And I think that the law is very clear. The rules are very clear. People are very well aware that this is the process to get rid of that bust. Folks have been patient. We have been patient. We have had conversations in the media and also behind the scenes. And people keep saying, just wait. We got to go through this step. We got to go through this step. We got to go through that step. But let me tell you something. Justice too long delayed is justice denied. And for the 13 to 16% of Black folks in this state, it is unfair for a former slave master to stand in that chamber. And I'll tell you something, because people were throwing cloth over the bus, there are gold ropes around it now. So it almost makes him look like a VIP. You have a right to study and revere your history, but not when it's at the cost to other people. Nathan Bedford Forrest belongs not in the Capitol, maybe in a museum where there can be historical context provided, but he does not belong in that Capitol. And I really hope that we'll stop all this and that we will understand that it's 2021. There is no place for someone like Nathan Bedford Forrest in our state capitol.
Would you think about maybe saying something to McNally about it, since that's what's going on right now, and it seems like now is a good moment to pressure them?
Certainly. I mean, I think that Lieutenant Governor McNally has always had an open door. And so that will be something as we move back into the legislative session next week, that I will have that conversation, because I think that sometimes people just need to hear your perspective and hear something outside of their own. And I mean, I've said it in the press, I've said it on the floor, but I think certainly I'm open to having a conversation with anyone, anyhow, so that they can understand the seriousness of that bus being there and the importance of it being removed. Well,
this is me saying this, not you saying this, but Governor McNally was in hot water a couple months back because he posted what seemed like a threatening meme during the protests at the Capitol. So, when you put that together with protecting the bus, it just starts to paint an ugly picture. Maybe he'll be willing to listen to you. I appreciate you giving us all this time. I wanted to ask you one more thing, just because you mentioned it in your State of the State Prebuttal, and I think it's a really important topic and one that, I personally would like to see Democrats focus on more. We are really far behind when it comes to marijuana legalization. We are one of the only states left where it's fully illegal. What can we do to push that along? It's so beyond past time. It seems like it has bipartisan support on some level. There are one-issue voters on both sides of the aisle when it comes to this topic. How do we center this? Because it's not only an economic issue, it's a racial justice issue, it's a health issue. So many things come to a nexus when it comes to medical marijuana or marijuana in general, decriminalization. How do we make this more of an issue?
Well, I'll tell you what, Vanderbilt published a study a couple of years ago that shows the majority of Tennesseans are in support of some level of legalization of marijuana. My colleagues across the aisle have maintained that if the government reschedules or reclassifies marijuana, then that's when they'll move towards legalization. I served on a task force on criminal justice reform for the Biden campaign, and that was one of the things that the Biden campaign agreed to was reclassifying marijuana. And so I think if that happens on a federal level, then there's really no reason why my colleagues, no excuse that they can give at that point. But I will say this also. Tennessee is becoming one of those states where, every other state has done it, whether we're talking about Medicaid expansion or reevaluating our laws around marijuana. It's unfortunate. And I really do hope that it has it does have bipartisan support. And I really do hope that we can, in some way, somehow, address this in this legislative session. It's just too important. Like you said, there are too many people who are in jail right now and whose lives have been devastated by something that's legal in the majority of states in this country. That's really unfortunate. Whether or not you believe in marijuana or it's something that you want to partake in, either you believe it medicinally or recreationally, it is still something that is incarcerating and ruining the lives of folks. And at the bare minimum, I should not be able to go, because not to quote Sarah Palin, but I can see Arkansas from my living room. Okay. And I should not be able to go to Arkansas and be able to have medicinal marijuana, or go to Missouri or Illinois. But in a state like Tennessee, where we've seen people have to move away so that they can get that type of treatment, a state like Tennessee, it just seems to be a non-starter almost. Like we get there and then we don't.
Well, I think you're on the right page. I would just love to see, because even on the federal level, they're starting to center it a little bit more. Mm-hmm. I would love to see it like move up the list is what I'm trying to get at. And, so I think you're all kind of in agreement that it's something that we need to do. I would just love to see it. I don't know what it would take to jump the list, but I would love to see you guys make it a priority. And, it sounds like you're on board for that. But you mentioned, just to bring it back to the state of the state, on Monday, Governor Lee's going to stand up there and talk about how great Tennessee is doing. And what he's not going to say is that we are at the bottom in infant and maternal mortality, at the bottom in poverty, at the bottom in opioid overdoses. We're number one in medical bankruptcies, number one in highest percentage of minimum wage jobs. I could do this all day. And so, the real state of the state is not what Governor Lee is going to say on Monday. And so I appreciate that you're willing to stand there and say it. And, we need to keep saying it every day until more people hear it. So thanks for what you're doing. And I'm going to give you one last chance to make an announcement.
I will not be making an announcement, but I will say this. I love Tennessee. Yeah. I think Tennessee is a great state, but we just have work to do. And before we can actually get work done, we have to acknowledge that we have some issues that have to be addressed. We can't sweep it under the rug. We can highlight the great and good things that we've done, but at the same time, we cannot ignore those issues that have to be addressed. So, and no announcement. I will say this: I'm running for state senate in 2022, so I'll announce that. I'm running for re-election.
Senator Raumesh Akbari, thank you so much. We will talk to you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
That's the senator. Appreciate you guys sticking around, and we'll be back on Tuesday. The state of the state is on Monday, and again, Governor Lee is going to stand up there. He's going to talk about how great he's been doing. He's going to talk about how great the state is doing. The numbers just don't bear it out. We have an F in education funding. I didn't even list that. We're at the bottom in so many categories. So we do have a lot of work to do. And this is sort of a feast or famine state. Nashville's doing well. There are some places that are doing really well. You go out into the rural parts of the state and you pretty quickly see that not everybody is thriving. I encourage people to check out when remote area medical comes to town and they give free health care to people who can't get it any other way. And we look like a third world country when they set up shop in some of our cities. So we'll let you guys know when that's happening. In the meantime, make sure you follow all the haulers and chip in if you can. It really, really helps. And have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.